Okay, I'm going to respond to some comments on my YouTube channel from quite a while ago, but better late than never. I responded in text, but I thought I should go through some of these in more detail. So these are comments on the video, Efilism Arguing the Argument. And the first one I'll respond to is by Final Fantasy 8911. He said, "Lifeism is a retarded philosophy based on an is-ought fallacy. Lifeists claim that what is what ought to be, that what is what's justifiable because it is. And is absolutely does not justify itself. Just because humans are a reproducing machine does not mean it is rational or good to be such. It doesn't mean you should continue to be a dumb reproducing machine. That's retarded." And I responded, "There is no is-ought fallacy. Look at the last slide and try paying attention next time." And he said, "You are making an is-ought fallacy and an appeal to nature fallacy. The entire foundation for your lifeism is that one ought to reproduce and live because one was designed by dumbass evolution to do such. Your lifeism has no rational foundation." Okay, so I'm going to do what I told him to do. I'm just going to go and read over the last slide and show that there is no is-ought fallacy or appeal to nature fallacy. So just give me a sec to find that thing wherever I put it. Okay, here is the last slide. It is titled Efilism, Nihilism, or Lifeism. And I said, "There is no a priori foundation for value. We are not compelled to accept any value premise. We are not forced to accept or reject life. We are reproducing machines. We have an objective purpose to reproduce. If you reject life, you are still a reproducing machine. You are just a defective one. I choose to be an effective reproducing machine. I affirm life." Okay, so that is what I said. He is claiming that I said one ought to reproduce and live because one was designed by, in his words, dumbass evolution to do such. Did I say that? No. I said there is no a priori foundation for value. We are not compelled to accept any value premise. We are not forced to accept or reject life. So I didn't say we are forced to accept life because life exists, or because we are reproducing machines we must reproduce. I said we are reproducing machines, and that is our objective purpose, right? As machines, that is what we were designed by evolution to do. I did not say that because of that fact, we must adopt reproduction as the subjective purpose of life, that we must believe in reproducing as a value. What I said was, I choose to be an effective reproducing machine. I didn't say I am compelled, or because it is natural, it is good, or because it is, it ought to be. I didn't make any such claim. So he is just substituting a straw man for what I said because he wants to fight against the straw man rather than deal with what I said. And the other thing he is avoiding is basically the entire content of the video up to the last slide, because the video was a critique of Efilism's foundations, Efilism's claim to a rational foundation, right? In my video, I critiqued that claim. And so he just dodged that entire issue and instead chose to attack a straw man that he imposed over the last slide of the video. Okay, and admittedly, this slide doesn't go into much detail because, this video was about Efilism. It wasn't about my worldview. But at the end, I felt like I had to say something about what are the options and where do I stand. rather than just ending it on, well, there you go, Efilism has no rational foundation, bye-bye. Okay, but if he is criticizing me, saying I have no rational foundation, well, yeah, I'm not claiming anybody has a rational foundation in the sense that we are compelled to accept some value premise. What I said was there is no a priori foundation for value. I don't believe there is such a foundation. But if he believes there is, if he believes he has a rational foundation for Efilism, then he should be addressing the main content of the video, which was the critique of Efilism. He should be justifying his foundation. And if he wants to critique what I'm saying in this last slide, that's fine, go ahead and do it. But critique what I actually said. Don't impose a straw man on top of it and fight your straw man and act like, you won a great victory by fighting a straw man. But, really more importantly, I think if you're going to attack anybody else for not having a rational foundation, then you should address the critique that you don't have a rational foundation for your worldview. Okay, that no, altruism and hedonism are not self-evident truths, that we are not compelled to accept them. That was, part of the main content of the video that he simply ignored. So Final Fantasy, there's my challenge to you. Go justify your worldview. Bring it back to me. I offered this guy a debate in another thread, and he refused to have a voice debate, but I challenge any Efilist to address the critique I made of their worldview, and if they want to critique my worldview, that's perfectly fine too. I have no problems with that, but yeah, this is just a straw man and also a kind of dodge. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Alright, the next one I'm going to respond to is by Christopher Jordan. He said, "You say I choose to be an effective reproducing machine. This is getting into the concept of free will. The fact that you are not a defective reproducing machine is contingent upon your DNA, correct? Or rather, your DNA coupled with external experiences that form your present biology. You have an understanding of biology and instincts. I'm curious about your take on free will. Perhaps choosing to be effective is the same as choosing to be happy, intelligent, or healthy. It's not really a choice." And I replied, "Okay, here's my take on free will. First of all, what is a real choice? The critics of free will seem to believe that our choices are not real because they have prior causes. Their idea of a real choice seems to be an uncaused cause. But could an uncaused cause be considered a choice? Imagine that you are offered vanilla or chocolate ice cream. Your choice. Now suppose that choice is an uncaused cause. In that case, it would not depend on any properties of you. It could not depend on your preferences, right? So if you prefer vanilla to chocolate, that could have nothing to do with your choice, because that would be a prior cause. It could have nothing to do with your knowledge. So, for example, let's say you knew that you were allergic to chocolate, so if you ate the chocolate, you would die. Well, that couldn't have anything to do with your choice, right? Because that would be a prior cause. So this choice would have to just appear out of nowhere, right? It would just get beamed into your head by the uncaused cause fairy. She would wave her magic wand and this uncaused cause would just appear in your head and that would be it, right? Well, to me it's fairly obvious that that would not be a choice. That's not what we mean by a choice. That's almost the opposite of a choice. A real choice is when an outcome depends on you. It depends on your desires, your knowledge, and your thought processes. A real choice is when a conscious intention is created in your mind and that intention is used to generate action and that action determines an outcome. So in your mind, you consider vanilla or chocolate, you form a little model which says vanilla, and that model then causes your arm to reach out and it causes you to say, I'll take the vanilla, please, and then you take the vanilla. Okay, that's an example of a choice. And it has to depend on you. So choices must have prior causes. And free will is not an uncaused cause. It is the causality of the universe flowing through your consciousness. Or in other words, flowing through you. Having said that, I think the reason for the free will determinism paradox is that it juxtaposes subjectivity and objectivity. It makes us think about ourselves as being objects, not just ourselves as bodies, but the brain, the mind, as an object, and that always creates a kind of cognitive dissonance, what I call subject-object dissonance. This paradox is not really about free will versus determinism. It's really about subject and object. It's about reconciling the subject with the object. Okay, now let me go back to what he said at the end there. He said, perhaps choosing to be effective is the same as choosing to be happy, intelligent, or healthy. It's not really a choice. Well, I don't think we can choose to be happy because I don't think happiness is possible. At least in the long run. Like in the short term, sure, you could choose to do one thing or another and that would make you feel more or less happy in the immediate future. But in the long run, I don't think we have any control over that, because I don't think it's possible to be happy in the long run. We don't have much control over our intelligence because that is mostly determined by genes. It is partly determined by what we do, like if you treat yourself really badly, like if you do a lot of drugs or hit yourself in the head with a hammer or something, you can affect your intelligence, and of course, if you spend all your time playing video games, you'll probably have at least less knowledge of the world than if you read books and go out for walks and stuff like that. But, as far as just the ability to reason and stuff like that, we don't have much control over that. We do have a fair bit of control over health. Health is not, it is largely determined by genes, but it's also largely determined by what we do. What you eat, how much exercise you get, things like that. Do you commute to work or do you walk to work, right? Those sorts of things are going to affect your health, and we do have conscious control over those things. As for reproduction, we have a lot of control over reproduction. In fact, the main reason for low fertility in modernity is that people are simply choosing not to have kids. It's not the only obstacle. For some guys, finding a mate is an obstacle. But choosing to have kids is one of the biggest barriers to reproduction in modernity. It's kind of ironic that beings that evolved to reproduce are now choosing not to reproduce, and the biggest challenge that has to be overcome to be an effective reproducing machine is just choosing to have kids, right? It's kind of it's interesting. It's a little bit ironic, but it's not inexplicable. It is very explicable because we didn't evolve to, in the environment we evolved in, we didn't have to consciously want kids to reproduce. If you wanted sex, if you were a man attracted to women or a woman who, was just attracted to living, you were probably going to have kids. So it wasn't a big deal. We didn't have to make that choice. Now we've been placed in an environment where we have the freedom to choose whether or not to have children, and it turns out, which is kind of an interesting fact, that our emotions generally, for most people, make them choose to have fewer than 2 children. Like on average, first of all, a lot of people choose to have none. And even those who choose to have children choose to have relatively few. Maybe the average is 2, and then some people can't get there. But our emotions are not adapted to this environment, so people are choosing not to reproduce. And so if you consciously decide to reproduce, you will probably have a lot more kids. You will probably be a much more effective reproducing machine. Now, I was thinking that maybe he was implying that I was post hoc rationalizing, that I had just had kids, wanted kids for other reasons. Like the conscious choice had nothing to do with it, and I'm just post hoc rationalizing what I would have done anyway, or what I did do anyway. Well, of course, there's no way to know for sure, because I can't conduct an experiment in which I don't make that choice. But I will say that I chose reproduction as my core value when I was 17 years old. So I went through this process of confronting nihilism and deciding what to do with my life when I was young, long before I had kids, long before I even had a girlfriend. I was 17 years old. I was out in the mountains. I had been out there for about a week. I was lying on a mountaintop under the stars thinking about life. So I think that choice, that philosophical process of critiquing the ordinary worldview, abandoning it, going through nihilism, and then developing my own worldview did have a big effect on my life. And I doubt very much that I would have as many children as I have. I mean, I don't know what would have happened. I can't go down that alternate path, right? But I do think that choice played a big role in my life. So yes, consciousness can affect your life. We are not just puppets of our desires. I mean, in a sense we are, but our desires are us. And also thought has a big effect on what we value, and values generate emotions. So it's not all bottom up, it's also top down. And consciousness can play a big role in creating values, even choosing values, and in generating your destiny. Okay, Jolly Crocodile said, yeah, gotta be honest here, pain and pleasure aren't equal. Relief from pain isn't exactly pleasure itself, and there are plenty of examples of pain that doesn't get relieved, like terrible torture, disfigurements, and age. And I said, I'll explain it in another video. For now, I'll just point out that none of the things you mentioned are pain. They might be causes of pain, but they aren't pain. That's the first distinction you need to make when you are thinking about emotion. I'm not going to read through the whole thread here. So I'll make a few comments about this issue first. The first thing I'll say is that this requires some, more discussion than I could put into the Efilism video, because the video was about Efilism. It wasn't about emotion. It wasn't about my theory of emotion. It wasn't about my worldview, right? I was giving my opinions on these issues, right? I was saying, well, I think pain and pleasure are symmetric. But I didn't have time to go through the entire explanation for that, because that doesn't really belong in an Efilism video. So I'll try to do another video on that, or maybe just a blog post, I don't know. Maybe I'll just give a brief example, or a couple of examples that illustrate the dynamics of desire. The best meal that I ever had in my life was a breakfast sandwich and a cup of coffee with a lot of cream and sugar. And what made it the best meal of my life was that I was really, really hungry. I had been on a long canoeing and backpacking trip and for about 2 weeks, and this was at the end of it. I was canoeing down a river. I hadn't eaten in about a day and a half. So I was really hungry. I had lost a fair bit of weight. I had been doing, hard exercise for 2 weeks out in the mountains, out on lakes and rivers, and so, I was lean and I was hungry. And I knew about this ferry crossing on the river, little ferry crossing, where they had a little kiosk set up so you could buy, for truckers basically, because trucks cross the river here. So that the truckers could buy coffee, breakfast sandwiches, hamburgers, stuff like that, French fries, whatever. I didn't have much money, but I had a couple of bucks, and I pulled over at this ferry crossing, and climbed up the bank, went to this little kiosk, and I got a breakfast sandwich and a cup of coffee. And I poured out half the coffee, filled it up halfway with cream, put like 3 or 4 sugars into it, and then took it back to the canoe, and I ate that as I was drifting downstream. And that was the best meal I have ever had. And the reason it was the best meal I've ever had is not because the breakfast sandwich was so great. I mean, it was good. It was bacon, eggs, cheese, in an English muffin. It's a good meal. And the coffee wasn't great. I mean, it was mostly cream and sugar. I couldn't choke down that kind of sweet, creamy coffee right now. But, what made the meal good was the hunger. So I had to be deprived of food to really enjoy food that intensely. I had to be really deprived of food. I had to go through the hunger to enjoy the pleasure of eating that meal. And that's basically how desire works. It's a cycle. There are motivations like hunger that motivate you to do something, and you experience pain when the motivation is created or when it increases, and pleasure when it decreases. You can see this in yourself, and you can see this in others. Okay, let me give another example of this. Let me give an example that has to do with disfigurement, which Jolly Crocodile mentioned. I knew this girl who was crippled. She was paralyzed from the waist down. So she was in a wheelchair her entire life, and she couldn't do normal things easily, right? She couldn't just go to the washroom. She couldn't just go to the store to buy groceries. She couldn't just go for a walk. She would probably never have a boyfriend or a husband or kids. I mean, even if she had a boyfriend, he would probably be in a similar situation. So she would never be able to have, sex. She had what almost everyone would agree by their standards to be a shitty life. And almost nobody would want to be put in that situation, right? Almost nobody would say, yes, put me in a wheelchair, make me crippled, I'll live my life that way, that'd be just fine. Nobody will say that. Almost everyone negatively values this condition. Almost everyone says this is a shitty condition. It's much worse than being able to move around, go for a walk, and do all the other things people do, And so I knew her. We were in this same lab working on similar things. And so I saw her every day, pretty much. And, my life was, by most people's standards, way better than hers. I could just go to the washroom and take a piss without worrying about it. I didn't have to drag myself out of a wheelchair to get on a toilet, right? I could just go down to the cafeteria and get a cup of coffee, just wander around, look at stuff. At the end of the day, I would go home to my wife and kids. So I had all of these things that she didn't have. And by almost anybody's standards, my life was much, much better, right? Now, if you just observed the two of us, would I appear to be happier than her? The answer is no. At any given moment, one of us might be feeling more or less happy than we were the previous moment or whatever. Like our emotions would go up and down depending on what was going on in our lives. One day I might be feeling depressed because of something. Another day I might be feeling good about something. Same for her. If you just observed these two people who are in objectively very different conditions, you will see that their emotional states are about the same on average. They go up and down depending on their circumstances, but it's not like one person is happier than the other person. So you can just observe this. So this demonstrates that our feelings of pleasure and pain do not come from our actual objective condition. Being in a shitty condition doesn't make you feel bad. Being in a good condition doesn't make you feel good. And there are lots of ways to verify this. This is one of the most obvious things empirically. If you just look at the world, you can see this in like 5 minutes. It's one of the most obvious things that's hidden in plain sight. And it's hidden by our intuitions. It's hidden by the way our brains work. I'll just give one more example, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. I'm already way over budget on this. And I'm babbling a bit. I should have written down an answer instead of trying to do this off the top of my head, but oh well. Okay, heroin addiction. The heroin addict takes a drug, well, any opiate drug, like opiate addiction in general. Opiates make you feel good because they take away all your motivations. They just wipe out your motivations. And when that's happening, when that biochemical process is happening, your subjective experience of getting all your motivations erased is pure pleasure. It just feels really good, and you feel really relaxed. You know, when they're all gone, you're just there, you're mellow, you don't care about anything. Any little worry you had, any little itch you had, any little ache you had, all that stuff is just gone, right? Now, if it were possible to get more pleasure than pain in life, then surely the opiate addict would be the happiest person in the world, because they're taking a drug that is literally just a happiness pill, right? It just makes you happy. But the thing is, when the drug wears off, you feel bad. When all the little aches and pains and worries, you know, all the little anxieties and irritations, all that stuff comes back, and now you're aware of it, and now it feels bad. Right? So you can see the cycle in the cycle of opiate addiction, where they can take a drug to feel good, but then it makes them feel bad when the drug wears off, and then they go looking for the next fix. And even though they might consciously understand that the pain of withdrawal is an effect of the drug, just as the pleasure is, their brain, they're intuitive, like at a deeper level, they don't make that connection. And that's why they become addicted to it. Because their brain says, hey, this drug solves all problems. It just makes me feel good, right? It's like a universal problem-solving pill. But what it really does is it erases the motivations in your brain. Okay, anyway, I will talk more about that some other time, I guess, but I don't want to go on and on about it. So I'll go on to another comment. The next one I will read is by 86 Maldoror 86. Okay, this one is pretty densely worded, so this might not make a lot of sense, but I'll try to unpack it. He said, the pain-pleasure dichotomy is ultimately negated, since the fundamental nature of causality is rooted entirely in negative orientation, which extends to its process, its execution, its apotheosis, and its possible recurrence. The initial desire inherent within the first cause clearly demonstrates that suffering reigns supreme and is unbounded, since the very presence of desire unequivocally indicates an unsatisfactory condition, while pleasure is the addictive illusory trap which incentivizes the propagation of its disease via the will towards more suffering. All phenomena are bound and encompassed within this scheme of unending desire seeking fulfillment in response to deprivation, resulting in total absolute suffering. All right, let me first try to unpack what he is saying, because this is not in Mendham's view. This is a pantheistic, kind of metaphysical view that equates causality with the will and the will with pain. And I think both of those equations are wrong. The causality is not the same as the will. The will is a certain type of mental process. What makes the will is that it is a kind of causality, but it's a bottleneck, right? It incorporates a whole bunch of prior causes into one decision. You know, like it takes a whole bunch of information, an enormous amount of information, past experience, aggregated into knowledge, all the information of current experience, and it condenses that all down into some kind of decision, like vanilla versus chocolate, or should I run across the road now or wait for the light? So I don't think it makes sense to equate the will with causality. I think the will is something special. It like consciousness, I don't think resides in causality. But I understand why some people situate it there, or basically equate. They basically put subjectivity into objectivity by saying everything is conscious, or everything is like, in some sense, consciousness is really not confined to brains, but it's just, a brain is just a special version of it or something like that. I don't agree with that, but that is, I think, one of the ideas here. And the other idea that I disagree with is the equation of suffering with the will or motivation or desire. Because motivation gives us both pleasure and pain, right? The will is like motivation. It's the motivation to do something. You might feel pain when the motivation arises in you to do something, like you feel the urge to do it. Then you pursue that urge. Then if you satisfy that urge, you feel pleasure. I'm not going to get into a whole theory of the will, but I think that should be for another video or a blog post or something. But basically, our brains attach value to ideas of what could be, right? And then that creates a motivation to bring them about. And then if we bring them about, we feel satisfied, we feel good. So we get both kinds of experiences. The will is not suffering, the will is the will. Suffering is one kind of experience, one kind of subjective experience. There is another kind, which is pleasure. There's a contrasting kind of experience that is associated with motivation, right? Like you get hungry, so that creates the motivation to go get a hamburger. You eat the hamburger, you feel pleasure. You feel kind of pain, the urge to do it is kind of pain. While you're moving toward the goal, maybe you don't really feel pain because you're anticipating it. Then when you get there, if the hunger is satisfied, because if you manage to solve the problem, then you get the satisfaction of solving the problem. So, and you can see that same kind of cycle in other things, like in playing soccer. You can attach the will to some purpose, like winning a soccer game, and then go out and play the game, and you're motivated to play it. And you're going to have all kinds of experiences of both pleasure and pain during the game, right? Like when you score a goal, you're going to feel good. But if they score a goal, you're going to feel bad. And so on and so forth. You got all these little experiences of pleasure and pain as a result of this goal. I think what he's saying is that because everything is sort of moving, because everything is being pushed forward through time, and everything is doing things, this is sort of, I don't know, this illustrates that everything is unsatisfied. Like, for things to happen, they must be in an unsatisfactory state. Well, that's true. Our brains always generate new desires. So, like, let's set aside the equation of the will with causality and just focus on the human mind. We will never be satisfied for, a long period of time, because our brains will generate new problems for us to solve. Because we are reproducing machines, we evolved to go out there and reproduce. We didn't evolve to go out there and be happy or be satisfied. We're not climbing Mount Happiness. Our drives evolved to make us reproduce, and that's an open-ended goal. And there's no reason why we would be satisfied, right? Even if you have a beautiful wife and 5 kids, well, now you want another wife and more kids. Or now if you're the king of Babylon and you have a harem of 1,000 beautiful girls, well, maybe you want to conquer another kingdom and have another 1,000 girls. So you're never going to get to the end of it. You're never going to be satisfied. You're always going to have new desires. But that doesn't mean that everything is suffering, or that it's total absolute suffering. Okay, so that's where I would disagree with this view. All right. Gotta get through some more of these I guess I could read this one. This is by SecularDogma. He said, the first problem that always arises with these arguments about it being better to not live than to live because life is more bad than good, often used by the pro-choice crowd, is, then why haven't you killed yourself? The fact that people that make this argument haven't already killed themselves means that they don't even believe their pseudo-enlightened horse shit. They obviously quite enjoy living and think it is better to live than not to live. Nobody ever points out this inconsistency either. Everybody points out that, actually. And of course, Final Fantasy and some other Efilists responded to this. The Efilists are basically right on this thread, but I'll just read this response and then I'll talk about this a little bit. Okay, Final Fantasy 8911 said, psychopath. Continuing to live doesn't imply that the one living enjoys doing such. Antinatalists, Efilists have to work to prevent future victims from being born. If they all kill themselves, who's going to stop the future unnecessary suffering? There's someone killing themselves every minute anyway. No one is doing anything about it. Efilists need to live to fight cruelty in the world, not leave it to its own devices. So that's a rational reason to continue living in the Efilist context. If you have a rational counter-argument, asshole, then bring it out. I know you don't give a fuck about the future people to be tortured in the future, but Efilists do. And your psychopathic brain, focused on what's in it for me, isn't going to help anybody. Well, it's going to help him, I guess, right? Anyway, I mean, just as a meta comment, you can see that these Efilists are basically just like everybody else, virtue signaling, trying to claim virtue because they have their beliefs, right? The ideologies are pretty much all about cheap claims to virtue. You get to claim that you're virtuous just because you believe it and just because you bitch at everybody else and, rant and scream and you get to be mean and cruel and insult people and claim virtue while you're doing it. That's a huge part of the appeal of ideologies, that they give people this justification for being assholes and allow them to claim virtue while they're doing it. Anyway, but he's basically right. There are two arguments for why killing yourself is not a necessary response to being an Efilist. Like, just because you're an Efilist, it doesn't follow that you must kill yourself. One of them is the moral argument that Final Fantasy gave, that if you kill yourself, you can't do anything about the horror of life. So once you understand the horror of life, you're morally obligated to try to do something about it, not just kill yourself. Now, I think it's fair to question whether that's really the motivation, right? I'm sure it's not the motivation, but it is, at least it is a sort of valid argument if you accept the moral premise that you have some kind of obligation to do something about it. The other argument is more of a hedonistic argument, or I guess an argument from futility. That you can't bring yourself to kill yourself, that it's not a reasonable thing to expect somebody to be able to kill themselves even if they believe that life is bad, because we evolved not to kill ourselves, right? We evolved to avoid death, and killing yourself involves going over a huge barrier of terror, right? Sheer terror, not to mention pain. But even if you inflict no pain on yourself in the process, like no physical pain, you're not cutting your wrist or something, you're just taking a pill, even then there's a terror of death. And the Efilist might say, look, I can't overcome the terror of death. I can't bring myself to do this. But that doesn't mean that I think life is good. It just means I can't bring myself to do this. And they could still say, I don't think other people should be put in the position of being alive. So yeah, I think it is a bad argument. Although, and yeah, it's one that they've heard many, many times, and they have, I think, pretty good responses to. Although you can obviously question the motivation. Like, I don't think Efilists are really motivated to save people from suffering. I think that's bullshit. I think they're motivated to do what everybody else is doing, to signal their virtue, get status, play little debating games, win little pissing contests and all that other stuff. For the most part. All right, I'm going to skip over this one because it's about the pain-pleasure thing. And it's quite long, so I'll just skip this one. And that brings me to the Chad Globalist, also known as Carla Della Stella. So I'll just read this and read my response to it. I'm going to try to avoid ad-libbing on this one, because this is just getting too long. All right. She said, nihilism is a consequence of your biological reductionism, which places things into a kind of hierarchy that makes biological things somehow more real than things that are, for instance, socially constructed or mind-dependent. But this hierarchy is in itself a social construct. There is no reason why you would reject morality merely because it doesn't exist without human societies that sort of construct it. There is no reason why biological or physical things should somehow be considered to be more real than things that are constructed by humans. Efilism also suffers from biological reductionism, for that matter. Good video, though. All right, well, thank you, Carla. Okay, so here's my response. I will just read it. I said, what do you mean by reductionism? There is a hierarchy of types of order. For example, biology emerges out of physics and is constrained by physics. Every biological system is also a physical system, and so biological theories must be consistent with the laws of physics. That's a logical constraint on theory. If that's what you mean by reductionism, being logically consistent, then yes, I'm a reductionist. That doesn't mean we can descriptively reduce one layer of theory to another. For example, I don't think we can replace biological descriptions with physical descriptions. Biology supervenes on physics. Many physical descriptions correspond to the same biological description, so it's not possible to reduce biology descriptively to physics, right? So try describing a squirrel in terms of atoms and energy and force and electromagnetism. You're not going to be able to do it. Okay, so I don't think we can descriptively reduce squirrels to atoms, but that doesn't mean that squirrels are not composed of atoms or that any property of a squirrel transcends the laws of physics. Like a squirrel has to, satisfy the laws of thermodynamics, okay? Being a squirrel doesn't exempt it from the laws of thermodynamics or relativity theory or electromagnetism or anything else. The hierarchy of types of order is not a social construct per se, although scientific theories are socially constructed in a sense, but they are constrained by empiricism. Scientists created a hierarchy of theories because it was necessary to explain, predict, and control reality. The layers correspond to real processes of emergence, e.g., biology emerges from physics via autocatalysis and evolution. We know why order is arranged into layers. Basically, emergence. I don't think higher levels of order are less real than lower levels. I just think they must be consistent with lower levels of order. I have a theory of society, for example. I don't think society is less real than biology or physics. I think it is constrained by biology and physics. Physics takes in everything, so everything must be consistent with the laws of physics, right? Societies can't transcend the laws of physics. Biological systems can't, because they're all ultimately physical systems, right? Then I said social reality, the reality of social constructs such as money and laws, is not just another layer of order on top of psychology, biology, and physics. It is not a type of objective reality, nor is it a theory of objective reality. So she's kind of mixing things up in her comment. She's mixing up social constructs, morality, and then these theories of the world, and they have to be understood differently because there are different kinds of things. Social reality is a type of intersubjective order that we create by agreeing that it exists. E.g., we have conventions by which constructs such as money, laws, and property are created. So, for example, when I bought my house, I had to go through all kinds of conventional little rituals, like signing certain pieces of paper, exchanging certain amounts of money. It was quite a complex ritual, and certain documents had to be stored in certain places, and all these things had to be done to create the construct of me owning a house. And that construct does not exist in physics. It only exists in human affairs, right? Like, I don't own the house in a physical sense. I own it in social reality. And if our society were to change the rules tomorrow and say that, people who own houses no longer own houses. They have to give their houses to the state. The state now owns the house. Well, if that was the new way that society worked, then I wouldn't own the house anymore, right? So there's this thing called social reality that is not a physical thing. It's things like promises, laws, money that we create by performative utterances. By doing little conventional communication acts, we create these things. Okay, then I said morality is not a social construct, as I use the term. It is culturally emergent. And just as an aside, I think the term social construct should be confined to things that are explicitly constructed by society, like laws, money, property, etc. I think the term was misapplied to things like gender by the left to confuse matters, right? To make it seem like we're socially constructing everything. And it has a use that is meaningful, which is to refer to these things that we do explicitly create by, writing things on paper and agreeing, signing contracts and signing laws on the books or whatever, right? The judge issuing a verdict, all that stuff. Okay, those are social constructs as I use the term. Morality is something different. It is culturally emergent, but it is also a kind of intersubjective order. So in that sense, it is analogous to social reality, created by agreement. The difference is that the agreement is tacit and intuitive, and also that morality is presumed to be objective, not intersubjective. Just as theists believe that God is objectively real and independent of their minds, most people believe that good and evil are objectively real and independent of their minds. They don't understand that good and evil are created by humans, not imposed on us from above. Right? Like, most people think good and evil are imposed on us somehow. They're either built into our nature, or they're imposed on us by God, or they've never thought about it, but that's sort of the underlying assumption. They speak and act as if good and evil were objectively real. So at some level, they believe that they're objectively real, even though most people have never thought about it, never examined that assumption. Okay, I said being an atheist means that I understand the nature of religious belief, that it is a delusion and there is no objectively real God. Likewise, being amoral means that I understand the nature of moral intuitions, that they are mind stuff, and that there is no objective good and evil on which they are based. That doesn't mean I go around violating moral norms. It just means I know what they are, and I reject the idea that I have any ultimate constraints on my authority. I generally obey moral norms because of incentives, not because I view them as having authority over me. Of course, everybody obeys moral norms because of incentives, but what they do is they internalize the conformity and obedience into themselves, so they think, I'm a good person, and they don't recognize the role that these external pressures and constraints play in generating their behavior, right? They're sort of pretending, or maybe they consciously believe that they do things because they're good, because they're moral people making moral choices, and they don't recognize the psychological role of social pressures and constraints, of incentives and soft and hard incentives in shaping their behavior. So they have a kind of self-deception about their own motives, right? And so part of amorality is understanding that is self-deception, getting out of that bad faith and understanding that you're selfish. And even if you're conforming to moral norms and you're good, like I am a good person by most standards, I know that I'm not doing that because I'm intrinsically good or altruistic. I know that I'm conditioned and constrained and incentivized to do that. So it's part of it is understanding psychology and getting rid of that pervasive bad faith that is always part of morality. Like morality is bad faith. So is religion, right? They're lies. I mean, that's the thing. They're both lies. Okay, I said you could contrast my amorality with Mendham's morality. Mendham believes that he has an obligation to be altruistic, and that this obligation is independent of society and other minds. He believes that his altruistic moral premise is just logic. It feels like logic to him because it's a deeply entrenched assumption, and he can't think outside the box framed by that assumption. His thought is bounded by that assumption, just as my thought is bounded by the law of non-contradiction. Maybe not everyone is free to think outside that box, but I am. So my point here is that, if you want to look at an example of what morality really is, just look at Mendham. He doesn't think that his altruistic premise is a premise. He doesn't think that it's mind dependent. He doesn't think it's created by humans, right? He despises most people. He doesn't think he's been conditioned into it. He thinks it's logic. He thinks it's self-evident, right? And that's the way most people view morality. They don't understand what it is, and they view it as having some kind of, or imposing some duty on them from outside. Okay, man, I gotta take a break and get a drink of water. I feel like I'm going through this too fast, but this is taking a long time. Okay, the next comment here is by Andre Pfitzner. He said, good analysis and good reminder that rationality and nihilism are interlinked. Many stop philosophizing once they reach nihilism, but the most rational can confront nihilism and still continue. And continue even after other philosophies that scares most people even more than nihilism. And I said, thanks. Yeah, nihilism is a consequence of rationality, and it doesn't have to be an end point. It can be a turning point. And then Final Fantasy replied, he never read the final slide, right? He never fucking tried to understand what I was saying. He just keeps blabbering away. Like, what's the point of blabbering away, fighting your straw man in the comments section? Anyway, I'll just read some of these comments. He said, what rational can possibly be beyond nihilism? If nothing has value, then nothing has value and everything is meaningless. Well, that's not really what nihilism says. Nihilism is that there is no foundation. Nihilism is understanding, getting to the point where you recognize your condition, that you don't have an objective foundation for your beliefs. There are no indubitable premises. There is this cogito, I think, therefore I am, or better expressed as I am, right? Just here I am. Like, I can't really question that I exist, but everything else is dubitable, and that if you think about it psychologically, all of your beliefs are generated within a blob of jelly in a skull. So that doesn't mean they're wrong, but it means that they're not coming from some guaranteed source, right? They're only as reliable as that blob of jelly, right? So that's nihilism. Anyway, I'll go back to reading what he said. He said, what else is there to do? Fucking pretend or make up value? Well, you can choose to be what you are, right? That's what I said in the final slide. But yeah, I mean, you're not really making it up, right? We are objectively reproducing machines, so I didn't make it up. But I don't pretend that it sits on some objective foundation, that there's some God or something outside of me that says, you must, thou shalt reproduce. No, it's up to me. That's the point, right? So I'm the foundation. I am is the foundation, right? I exist as the foundation of a rational worldview. That's the only foundation you have. That's the point of the cogito. The only foundation you have to build on is I exist. But you don't exist in a completely unconstrained way, right? You are what you are. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a huge tangent. I'll just shut up and go back to reading. Okay, he said that's irrational in the nihilist context. Well, it doesn't really matter, because to a nihilist, rationality doesn't matter, right? Okay, I gotta shut up and just read, or I'm never getting through this. He said, logically, only suicide is rational under nihilism, because since nothing matters, might as well leave existence, since it's objectively a waste of time. No, that's completely fallacious. Suicide isn't rational under nihilism. If you don't have any values, then you can't make any value judgments, right? You can't say suicide is good or suicide is bad, at least not in an ultimate sense. But again, being a philosophical nihilist doesn't mean you don't have a nature. So no matter what, you're going to make value judgments. Just like you could be a philosophical nihilist, but if you see a tree, you're still going to believe it's a tree, even though you might say, I have no absolute certainty that that's a tree, and whatever my mind is representing, it isn't the thing in itself, and I have no direct access to the thing in itself. And you can go through all the critiques of knowledge, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I believe in doing this and critiquing knowledge, and this going through this philosophical and psychological process of thinking about thinking and thinking about knowledge and all that stuff. But that doesn't override your nature. So you're still going to say there is a tree, and when you walk toward the tree, you're still going to walk around it, not try to walk through it, even if you're a nihilist. And so going beyond nihilism is to some extent accepting your nature. Saying, well, I am a tree walker arounder, and I am a reproducer. I like girls, I can't just do anything. I'm not a kill myselfer. I'm a go out there and get hot chicks and make babies and do all those other things kind of person. Because that's my nature, and I could try to fight against it, but even if I fight against it, what's the point of fighting against it? Anyway, he said then, you and Andre are objectively dumbasses. There can be nothing beyond nihilism. Some dumb fuck nihilists say this, but they never say what exactly. And I responded, lol, you mad? I said what exactly. I choose to be what I am, a reproducing machine. I didn't have time to get into all the philosophy behind that choice, since this video was about Efilism, not about my philosophy. But I did say exactly what. Going forward, I'll talk more about these deep philosophical questions on my channel. But as you demonstrate, most people can't handle that kind of discussion. It creates too much cognitive dissonance. Nihilism is simply rationality unbounded by assumptions. In your case, your rationality is bounded by your assumptions of hedonism and altruism, and probably others. You rely on those assumptions to give meaning to your existence, And so you freak out when they are questioned, e.g., all caps, insults, etc. That's why Mendham starts screaming when his assumptions are questioned. He can't handle it. That's also why he thinks they are logic, because to him they are constraints on thought. To become fully rational, you would have to rid yourself of those assumptions and accept your condition of being subjectively free. That is nihilism. You would have to accept that condition before you can go beyond it. You would have to accept your responsibility for creating meaning. And this really is it, right? Like what everybody wants is for purpose, meaning, truth to be forced on them. They don't want to be free to choose it or to make the judgment completely in a completely unconstrained way. They don't want the full responsibility for their beliefs. They want to delegate some of their responsibility to God or to logic or to something else that's going to hem them in, constrain them, give them a frame, give them a purpose and a foundation. But we don't have that, really. Like, so if you try to really understand your condition as a human being, you're going to discover that you don't really have that. And if you thought you had that, that was a delusion. You're not constrained by altruism. You're not constrained by hedonism. You're not compelled to accept or reject any value premise. Anyway, and this guy is like, it goes on, insulting and blah, 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 blah. I offered him a voice discussion or debate, and then he said he can't do it because he has to be completely anonymous, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, I mean, it went on and on and on and on. Yeah, I didn't get a lot of these responses. I didn't get notified with these responses. You really can't trust YouTube's notifications. Anyway. Oh, he told me to debate in Mendham. He also said I could debate Superhuman Dance. So I said, sure, tell him to debate me. I said, in Mendham won't debate me. He's a coward. Of course I challenged him, and he ignored the challenge. I've commented on his videos. I made a reply video where I, was pretty... I just responded in kind to his insults, but I also actually made arguments, unlike him. And no response to that, right? So, no, he's running away. He's running away from the fight. He's a coward and a hypocrite. That's just the truth. And Mendham is a coward and a hypocrite. He will not get in the ring with anybody who doesn't accept his premises. Anyway, so I said... I told him to ask in Mendham to debate me. If he wants in Mendham to debate me, ask in Mendham to debate me. And I said, I'll debate any Efilist you can find who is willing. Just, give me any, this is an open challenge to all of the Efilists out there. Debate me. Okay? On Skype. It's got to be on Skype so we can both upload it. You don't have to go on video, just audio. Okay, I'll read a few more. Dave Skeet said, I have nothing to add other than that I appreciate this video and the time spent making it. This was a pretty good one. Thanks, Dave. It's nice to get comments like that. Somebody saying, hey, I watched your video and I found it interesting. That's cool. I'm glad you liked it. I'll skip over this one because it's on Pain and Pleasure. I'll skip over this one because it's kind of silly. Yeah, I'm not going to bother. It's just kind of funny, but I'm going to skip over that, and I'm going to skip over that. I think I'm at the end of them now, pretty much. LordOfTheEdge said, the soothing voice is back. You should talk about the shootings done in 2019. I think he's being serious that the voice I used in this was kind of soothing. Yeah, sometimes I manage to get myself into that mellow zone so I can do a calm, peaceful video. I try to do that because it minimizes the echo off the walls, which is bad for the audio. So I normally try to talk in a soothing voice. Torin McCabe said, "If I could press a button and experience 10 seconds of the best pleasure and then die, and all people who knew me would be better off, I would probably push that button. Just probably, though, because I am a doubting machine, I evolved to have heuristics rather than perfect rationality and perfect data. Thankfully, I don't have that button yet, and thankfully, I am only one person who is more depressive than normal. Perhaps in the future we will have that button, but right now we don't. So I will continue on in doubt and imperfection." I just like the way that ends, continue on in doubt and imperfection. Yeah, that's like part of the human condition. That we don't have perfect rationality, whatever that would mean. Well, I think what they mean by perfect rationality is actually, it doesn't even make sense. Because what they really want is not perfect rationality, but an objective foundation for rationality to begin from. And that's what we don't have. But anyway, I just wanted to read that because I like the way it ended. Continue on in doubt and imperfection. Yep.